breaking down the deals, data, and disruption shaping global markets. You're listening to The Daily Ledger with Dennis Sert.
Hey folks, today is Monday, December 1st, 2025. This is the Daily Ledger Show, and I am your host, Dennis Sert. Great to be here with you today. We've got some financial data and news to get into on the docket here. We're going to keep it short and sweet today. And why don't we just dive right into it? So, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is down about 0.5% today. Pretty much everything's down. So the Nasdaq is also down 0.55%. S&P 500 is down 0.37%. Bitcoin is down to 84K. So 84K 607. So that's what we're looking at for some of our big players here. Yeah, so today is a little bit of a light news day. I do want to talk about this briefly. American consumers lose patience with high car prices. Shoppers are downsizing, buying used vehicles, taking on longer car loans, and holding out for deals. So this is pretty indicative of the overall U.S. economy. The economy isn't doing incredibly well, as I've been saying over the past several episodes, pretty much since COVID hit. But in this article, it goes into how new car prices are approaching $50,000 this year, and seems like these dealers are hanging on to stock, like inventory, longer than they probably should. Or they want to. Yeah, so basically consumers are not really looking to take on a car loan or buy a new vehicle. So that's kind of tough. Okay, let's move on to this new story out here from TechCrunch. Did you know that yesterday was ChatGPT's 3-year anniversary? How about that? On November 30th, 2022, OpenAI introduced a new product to the world, innocuously describing it as a model called ChatGPT, which interacts in a conversational way. Yeah, this definitely changed everything when it came out. I remember when it first came out 3 years ago. Yeah, it was. I mean, we were all me and my friends were all saying like, "Wow, this is AI. Wow, it's here." And so, sort of interesting to see how far we've come in 3 years. Of course, NVIDIA definitely was a clear winner from this, up 979% since it launched. So, yay for Jensen Huang. Let's move on to this news story, also from TechCrunch. Amazon's AI chatbot Rufus drove sales on Black Friday. And it goes into some of the statistics here. And it actually says that users are more likely to buy if they've been directed to the product from AI rather than from non-AI traffic sources. In fact, 38% more likely to buy. So that's kind of interesting, because people trust AI so much that it has a really big effect on whether or not you're going to buy the product or not. So now you can kind of imagine like what happens in the future when there's a physical embodiment of the AI, like a humanoid robot, like a cyber cab. Maybe it could suggest taking you places, right? And that's with any cyber cab, whether it's Tesla cyber cab, Waymo, Zoox, etc. Pony. It could be a Neuralink. What happens when you're sort of given a dopamine hit maybe from the AI, and then suddenly you want to go, I don't know, buy a burger or something, or contribute to the economy. Yeah, so you can kind of, I mean, given this stat of 38% more likely to buy an Amazon product if it came from AI rather than not, you can kind of derive more, um, or like projections down the line, like I just did with autonomous vehicles, like the Neuralink, like a humanoid robot. You can kind of like derive scenarios in your head of what could come in the future, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, that's my take on that. I guess finally, I wanted to talk about this TechCrunch article. Avatar director James Cameron says generative AI is, quote, horrifying. So he goes into it here. He basically says that he does pretty much all of his directing sort of in the traditional way. So that is to say, like when they're doing like underwater scenes and stuff, they use like a giant, like 250,000 gallon water tank. Um, and then they sort of use makeup artists and visual designers to kind of like produce it rather than using generative AI, which he says is horrifying. Yeah, I still remember when Avatar 1 came out, and it was actually the highest grossing film of all time. And it was the first movie to hit 2 billion back in December 2009. So that was definitely quite a time. Of course, it's kind of a derivative of Pocahontas, right? Just in terms of the storyline, but that's okay. Um, it doesn't have to be the most original story in the world, but it ended up being a huge crowd pleaser nonetheless. But what's funny is they kind of obviously stopped putting out the movies right after December 2009 because it took 13 years for them to come out, or for James Cameron to come out with Avatar 2, The Way of Water in 2022. And now in 2025, just 3 years later, they're coming out with Avatar 3. So they're just churning these out like hotcakes, which is kind of funny. Like, why didn't you do it before in like 2012? So yeah, that's kind of my take on that. Okay, let's move on to the sponsor of the show, which of course is Byte AI. Byte AI is an AI-driven financial co-pilot for your stocks. It basically aggregates news sentiment around your portfolio, around your stocks. Also, takes into account technical indicators like the RSI curve, MACD/signal curve, Bollinger Bands, etc. And it comes out with a succinct sort of analysis about whether or not the stock is underbought, overbought, or neutral. And it's sort of very simply displayed to the user. So it says neutral here if it's neutral, and then when these are done here, it'll show green or red for whether or not it's overbought or underbought, respectively. Well, I got that backwards. It's red if it's overbought, green if it's underbought. But yeah. So we're just waiting on this to finish up here. It should take a couple more seconds. Seems like a lot of them are neutral today, but sometimes some are underbought or overbought. But yeah, I guess Avatar not Way of Water, Fire and Ash is coming out today, from what I understand. So that should be cool. I wonder what the weekend is going to look like for it in terms of box office sales. But without further ado, seems like our first overbought or non-neutral stock came up, and that would be Amazon. Looks like RSI is at 63, which is moderately overbought. The price is the same as the upper Bollinger Band, which is kind of high. Broadly bullish, underscoring AI-driven e-commerce momentum. Yeah, okay. How about Meta? Meta is overbought. RSI at 77.53, 0.54, which is extremely overbought. Coverage is broadly neutral with a couple pieces hinting at modest bullish tilt. Okay. Nice. Looks like for Microsoft, it's overbought. RSI near 72, extremely overbought. Driven my AI and cloud momentum. Yeah, okay. Nice. Okay, I think we're gonna leave it here for today. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Make sure to use the code podcast20 at Stripe checkout when using app.byai.me on the web app to get your 20% off discount off your first month. All right, peace, folks.